The Marvel Cinematic Universe should not work. It should have never worked, but there is one scene in the Avengers that completely sold the idea of an interconnected franchise. So we're going to break down this one scene, what I think is the most crucial scene in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Welcome back, ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and first, let me explain why this franchise never really should have worked. Like today, we take it for granted that different characters can pop up in each other's movies, but in this video, we're going to explain how it was the Avengers that trained us to think this way. See, movie audiences are already trained to understand the concept of a franchise. Hell, even before movies were largely serialized, when you walked into a Charlie Chaplin picture, The Little Tramp was his own franchise. But the first truly serialized film is, unfortunately, the feature-length racist feature Fall of a Nation, a follow-up to the also racist Birth of a Nation. This is the first major instance of a new film picking up the story of a previous film, a concept that was common in literature. For instance, there's like 40 books in the Wizard of Oz series. But the idea of characters crossing over into other franchises was largely confined to crossover episodes on TV.
Like when Steve Urkel flew his jetpack from Chicago to Seattle and appeared on Step by Step.
Exactly. And sure, Abbott and Costello met different monsters in their films, sort of saying that all of those monsters were in the same universe, but these were lighthearted Abbott and Costello comedies and not an attempt to tell a real cohesive story across several different separate franchises. Now, Marvel Comics span all sorts of stories, everything from the grounded street-level crime of Daredevil to the high-concept cosmic stories of Jim Starlin. The MCU then had to figure out how to pull off this same magic on screen. But Marvel Comics began fantastically with the Fantastic Four, and then they gradually introduced more grounded heroes like Iron Man and Daredevil. But the MCU had the opposite problem. The first film of the franchise begins with a grounded, real-world story about the War on Terror. A Humvee attack sets off a chain reaction that gradually introduces more fantastical elements in the film. Now, this makes the Iron Man armor seem somewhat plausible and makes the movie feel like it's happening in our world. But you bring that character into other franchises and you have a problem. So how could a character going up against terrorists in our world possibly fight off extraterrestrial gods like Thor and Loki? And Captain America: First Avenger told its own fantastical story, blending grounded elements with silly pulp nonsense like a guy with a skull for a head. Like if a guy with a skull for a head showed up in Iron Man, it would have seemed weird and out of place. And if Captain America went up against frost giants, they just would have ripped him in half. And yet the MCU was able to make this interconnected universe work with their best crossover movie, The Avengers. Now, The Avengers achieves an impossible feat. It tells its own unique story while also serving as a sequel to 4 different franchises. Look, really, let's face it, 3 different franchises. This is the greatest trick that Kevin Feige ever pulled, making us believe that a god, a war on terror warrior, and a pulp hero could exist on screen together. And Joss Whedon, allegedly a very bad person, pulled off that miracle in just 3 minutes and 14 seconds. Now, the scene I'm talking about is when Thor, Tony, and Steve fight in the woods, and they lay out a blueprint for the entire MCU to follow. So let's break this scene down, but first, let me explain the context for each character going into this movie. In Iron Man, we pretty much begin in the world that we knew in 2008, in the Afghanistan War. Now, Tony may have been inventing fantastical sci-fi weaponry, but like the Jericho missile didn't seem that implausible. Its technology seemed like something that could be introduced like any day now. Then Tony very gradually builds up his Iron Man suit, and the first version looks like something we could actually build, a big clunky monstrosity like the mech suit in Aliens. But then, for the majority of the runtime, he is methodically rebuilding and refining this suit. And then Iron Man 2 added in more suits, but they still stuck with the grounded premise. Tony has to use science to solve his problems. Captain America: First Avenger has a totally different tone. It's kind of silly, and its CG backgrounds look like paintings from 1940s advertisements. If Iron Man were to show up in this world, he would look out of place aesthetically. And Thor tells the story of gods that live on a higher plane of existence. Asgard has this grand sweeping palace. There's this weird gatekeeper who is watching you pee like all the time.
Perhaps someone has found a way to hide that which he does not wish me to see.
And the story just feels bigger than anything happening in Iron Man or Captain America's world. We see planets and other cultures, and the plot even has to nerf Thor's powers so he can slum it in a lower budget setting in New Mexico. Now, if Thor were to pop up in the movie Iron Man, he would have saved Tony Stark from the cave in seconds, and in First Avenger, he would have placed his hammer on the Red Skull's chest and shrugged off blasts from the Tesseract weapons. In other words, these three are completely mismatched in tone, powers, and even the villains they face. Tony struggled against Whiplash, but Captain America literally won World War II, and Thor defeated a giant cosmic-powered robot. So trying to connect these three characters in the same universe is an insane idea. It's like trying to say that Rocky, Lord of the Rings, and Toy Story all happen in the same universe. I don't know who is who in that analogy, but you get my point. So let's talk about how they pulled off this trick, because this movie is a masterclass in storytelling. Whedon took his time introducing each new element. The characters are brought in one at a time in a way that feels like a natural continuation of their solo movies.
Agent Romanoff, you miss me?
So first, we meet the human characters, the people we can most relate to. Fury, Coulson, Clint, and Eric Selvig. And this is tying all the franchises together with these characters who have cameoed in each franchise. And then we meet Loki, but hey, even if you haven't seen Thor, you get the idea. Big scary bad guy from space with a magic staff. The plot is even similar to the Masters of the Universe movie with Dolph Lundgren.
They made a He-Man movie? Can we watch it?
It's best we move on, trust me. And then we meet another human character, Natasha, and we get a sense of her skill set as both a spy and a fighter. Then she brings us to probably the most well-known character, Bruce Banner, because the Hulk TV show was still in everyone's collective memory. And then from Banner, we gradually move on to the more and more implausible characters. For instance, next we meet Captain America, and if you've not seen First Avenger, you still get who this guy is. He's a beefcake, reluctant action hero like John Rambo.
Do we get to win this time?
This time it's up to you.
The next franchise to be reintroduced is Iron Man, who at the time was the most successful MCU character, which is why he's allowed to bring along a supporting cast member into this film, while Jane is consigned to an island somewhere. But even then, all of these characters are not introduced by throwing them into action or already wearing their costumes. Well, Tony's wearing his costume, but you know what I mean. It's all staged very gradually to whet our appetites and to get us used to something familiar now becoming something new. I mean, think about it. That opening battle with Loki could have just straight up introduced Steve, Tony, and maybe Hulk. After all, Fury had teased in Iron Man 2 that he was getting together a team. But this way, we're able to slowly assimilate who these characters are and how they can interact together. If they would have come into it all at once, I think it would have been a turnoff for new members of the audience. And the movie keeps doing this. It keeps taking familiar locations and familiar scenes and then making them something new. For instance, we see Steve Rogers, a soldier on an aircraft carrier, something familiar, but then it flies, something new. Steve's first appearance in costume doesn't even come until his face-off with Loki, which again, slowly takes the familiar and remixes it into something new. For instance, this German man calls back to World War II.
Are always men like you.
And then Steve saves his life. Now, he's a man who is saving Germans instead of fighting them. And then we see him apply his old experiences to this same situation.
You know, the last time I was in Germany and saw a man standing above everybody else, we ended up disagreeing.
And for my money, the most thrilling moment of this film is actually here. The first time we see these two heroes from different movies in costume together.
Mr. Stark.
Captain?
It blew my mind that Iron Man was on screen with Captain America. It's like the time I heard Yoda say Chewbacca's name.
Goodbye, Chewbacca.
But this crossover was always going to be plausible. I mean, Tony's dad was in the Captain America movie. Now, after they capture Loki, the interplay on the ship is also crucial to setting up the character dynamics in this film. Tony and Steve immediately contrast each other, one blue, one red, and in their first conversation, they already disagree.
I don't remember it being that easy. This guy packs a wallop.
Still, you are pretty spry for an older fellow.
Tony is immediately mean and kind of a bastard.
You might have missed a couple things, you know, doing time as a capsicle.
And Steve demonstrates that he believes in command structure while Tony does not.
Fury didn't tell me he was calling you in.
Yeah, there's a lot of things Fury doesn't tell you.
So now we have the setup for like a really fun buddy cop movie, you know, opposites attract and all that. We see that these grounded characters could work together, but what about the big guys? How could Thor or Hulk possibly be on the same team as these lower powered human beings? Won't the big guys just crush all the bad guys and make these other characters irrelevant? And that is why this next scene is so important to the remainder of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So Thor is the final Avenger to be introduced because he is the most powerful. Bring him into the movie earlier and maybe they don't bother introducing Steve Rogers or Steve feels redundant. Now after he snatches Loki, we do get a cool character moment from both Steve and Tony.
We need a plan of attack.
I have a plan. Attack.
There's only one God, man. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress like that.
Now the next scene between Thor and Loki serves as a direct sequel to the ending of Thor. The two brothers catch us up on the last film and the fallout that happened after the ending.
What you say?
This scene also spells out Loki's motivation for the rest of the film.
I remember a shadow, living in the shade of your greatness.
More importantly, their conversation makes the rest of this movie personal.
I thought you dead.
Did you mourn?
We all did.
And I love how when Loki talks about traveling to other places and how much he's grown, he addresses Thor as
Odin's son.
using their father's name like a curse to show how Thor is just a sheltered papa's boy. So now everybody's goals have been established, we know who they are and how they want to approach the situation. And now we get the most crucial scene, the magic trick that established the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. Iron Man attacks Thor with the arrogance of a billionaire, and then we first see how their personalities clash.
Doth mother know you weareth her drapes?
Alright, so what? It's fun to see Thor interact with normal people. After all, we saw that in his movie.
This drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another!
But the real question in this scene is, how long will it take Thor to just kick Tony's ass and get Loki back to Asgard? So Thor hits Tony, which importantly does not rip a hole in Iron Man's chest, showing that Stark's newer armor can actually take some punishment. Then he knocks Thor so hard that the Thunder God breaks a tree in half. And if you've ever even tried to break a small branch, you know how hard that is to do. So then Thor escalates and decides to use his lightning. Now at this point, this move could have disabled Tony's armor. It could have given him something to strive for the rest of the film. Oh, my armor isn't as powerful as Thor's lightning, so I have to reconfigure it. But instead, a brilliant thing happens.
Power at 400% capacity.
How about that?
And by the way, the two of them do this again on purpose in Avengers Endgame. So this moment shows us that Iron Man can take the power of the gods. I mean, not for very long, but his tech is strong enough to redirect this amount of energy. This then makes Tony a credible threat against Loki and the aliens later in the film. And then Tony is able to actually lift Thor and take him for a ride and bang him into a mountain. But he does not dominate the fight. Thor is able to kick off the mountain, which makes him drop his hammer. So Whedon has established that Iron Man can take Thor's energy and a hit from the hammer, but what about a fist fight? He and Thor trade punches and we see that yes, Tony would definitely lose in a straight up arm wrestling match. When Tony headbutts, Thor barely feels it, but when he gives it back to Tony, it knocks him back 10 feet. Suddenly, Tony is once again the undercard. He tries to charge, but Thor catches him, but then Tony uses his intelligence and the laws of physics against Thor, using the momentum from the catch to swing Thor away. So we have established that he is a more strategic fighter than Thor, who is used to just overpowering his enemies, which by the way he does by slamming Iron Man like a rag doll. But Tony is faster than a god, slipping out of his way, and then he squares up again until Steve breaks up the fight like dad yelling in the back seat.
Hey! That's enough!
Steve tries to de-escalate, and then Thor's arrogance flares up and he swats away Iron Man and puts everything he has into a hit on Captain America. And guys, this is the moment. Without this moment, I don't know if the rest of the MCU works.
It probably wouldn't have worked out like everything else.
Thor's hammer sends an immense amount of energy into Captain America's shield. Now, we have seen Steve's shield absorb bullets and even the energy of Hydra weapons, but the power of a god, the hammer of Thor, the energy disperses in a huge explosion which even knocks Thor backwards. And we see that Steve is able to stand. His shield successfully disseminated the energy from Thor's blow. Now, this shows that if he uses his shield, his body can stand up to punishment from cosmic powers. Now, the entire environment is destroyed, but the three of them are still standing. And this sends a very clear message to the audience. These three are literally on equal footing. These people all bring different skill sets and personalities to this team, but they are all small parts of a whole. Now, think about how differently this scene could have played out. Maybe if Whedon had gone another way, the MCU would look very different. For instance, Thor could have wiped the floor with both of them, so then they would have to team up to fight him. Or they could have unleashed the Hulk to fight Thor, sending the message that the regular humans were never going to be as powerful or match up against the big guys. Or maybe the hammer smack could have actually hurt Steve, which maybe would have been a funny gag, but then we wouldn't be able to take Steve seriously later on in a battle against Thanos' forces in later movies. Or maybe all three of them could have ended the scene unconscious, which would have shown that they were all kind of lightweights. Instead, the scene is perfectly balanced. It ends with all of them having a very relatable human moment. They're out of breath.
Are we done here?
I mean, the scene then plays like boys fighting in the schoolyard and then making up just outside the principal's office. And just like in the comics, the heroes have to fight so we can get a sense of their power sets, and then they're ready to move on and get to work. Think about all the moments that came after this that only worked because this scene played out so well. Now we can see that human beings can successfully match up against cosmic forces. So this means that Spider-Man can fight Thanos, or spar with Doctor Strange, or Steve Rogers can fight aliens from space, or the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Avengers can single-handedly fight Thanos in Infinity War, or even the final fight in Endgame when loads of low-powered individuals are able to survive against cosmic beings because of their technology, intelligence, and tenacity. Now, because of this scene, this is a universe where a guy with a bow and arrow can take down a guy with super speed. And let's use the transitive property. If Spider-Man can fight Steve Rogers, and Steve Rogers can take a hit from Thor, and Thor can fight the Hulk, well, that means that Spider-Man can fight the Hulk. See, this scene removed power classes from heroes, and it made it plausible for all of them to fight alongside one another. And this scene also became a rich goldmine for future writers. It laid the foundation for Thor and Tony's antagonistic relationship in Age of Ultron, and for the mutual battlefield respect that Thor and Steve have for one another.
You ready for another bout?
What, you getting sleepy?
Notice you've copied my beard? No, give me that. You have the little one.
This one scene really sells the idea that characters from different kinds of franchises can now appear together on the same screen. It showed us how much fun it is for these opposites to occupy the same scene. Without the Avengers and without this scene, I don't think these franchises would have gone very far. I mean, superhero movies at the time had diminishing returns as filmmakers quickly ran out of ideas to keep their characters interesting. But the box office for these movies exploded after the Avengers. Every solo film made a ton more money than the previous installment, and then Iron Man 3, the direct follow-up, was the first solo film to crack $1 billion. But most importantly, this scene establishes that these characters are kind of idiots. They're all arrogant and broken, and they can't succeed without help from each other. This scene did more than establish that each character has a power set that can match up against the others. This scene showed us the fun and the joy of seeing these characters fight and then work together. Think about all the incredible moments that happened in the MCU after this, moments that stem from this one scene. When a soldier, a playboy, and a god think they're fighting, but really, they're becoming friends. Well guys, that's just what I think is the most crucial scene in the MCU, but let me know what you think down in the comments or at me on Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, or on our free-to-join Discord server. And if it's your first time here, welcome to the channel. Please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.